Hey BookTube, this is Friday Reads.
I got my ticket for the long way round.
I'm Jen and I talk about audiobooks. Unfortunately, I was not here last week to talk about audiobooks because I was away from home and busy and I had no internet access, and at one point I had no electricity. So it had to do with moving people, helping them move and all that kind of thing. So I thought I would tell you about what I've been reading and then what I will be reading this weekend. I'll start off with It's in His Kiss by Jill Shalvis. This is narrated on audio by Suela Al-Attar, and this is a reread for me. February is a reread month for me, and this is book 10 in the Lucky Harbor series. So my only criticism of the narration by Suela Al-Attar is simply that the main character, Becca, is supposed to have a faint New Orleans accent, and the narrator gave her more of a New York accent. And it was very appropriate for the character, but it's not the way that the character was written originally. It didn't really matter. It just kind of bugged me. It stuck back in the back of my mind that this wasn't a New Orleans accent. She voiced the character of Lucille expertly. And if you've read these books, you know what I'm talking about. I liked the range that she gave to Sam, who was one of the main characters. And Jill Shalvis is able to write dialogue just really, really well. So thoroughly enjoyed that one all over again. And I gave it 4.5 to 4 3/4 stars. So I'm probably going to round that up to 5. Then I picked up Love Unscripted. This is by Tina Reber, and it is narrated on audio by Madeline Maybe. Madeline Maybe was okay for this. She had a bit of a sharp tone, which when you speed them up to about 1.25 the speed, everything sounds very clipped. And when things sound clipped, they sound like the character is very no-nonsense and very, like, don't mess with me, I don't have time for that. And I think she had that kind of a voice even without having been sped up. And so, I don't know, that kind of colored my opinion of the main character. I ended up DNFing this book. I got about 25% of the way in, and it's new adult romance. The main character is 27. She's a businesswoman who has inherited a pub, and they're filming a movie in her town. And one day the big star of the movie comes running in, trying to get away from rabid fans. And so she develops a friendship with him. So there's the trope. And then you get to an evening where someone in her bar, a person on stage, she has live music, calls her up to play, and she's all embarrassed and knows she doesn't want to go up there, and then she has to because she's, whatever. And then she plays You've Got a Friend, and she kind of dedicates it to the major movie star guy. And I thought, seriously? Okay, first, number one, cheese factor was right out the window. I mean, we're talking some serious Velveeta. It was bad. And second of all, really, why? Why did this author have to throw that in there? She couldn't just leave it at she's a regular girl. No, she had to be talented in this one special way. Really, no. I'm sorry. No, I just was not going to waste my time with that anymore, so I ended up DNFing it. And I don't know, it's an average book as those sorts of things go, and if you like that kind of thing, maybe you'd like it, but not for me. I picked up Unearthly by Cynthia Hand. This is book 1 in the Unearthly series, and it is narrated on audio by Samantha Quan. I had forgotten how much I love Samantha Quan's narration. She has that young kind of, I don't know, quirky is the best word I can think of for the way she voices this character, but she's not quirky. She's just in that awkward kind of 16, 17-year-old phase of, I'm not exactly sure, but I want to be sure, that kind of thing. She did all of the voices really well. I liked her range for all of them. This was a reread for me, and I wanted to see how it would measure up since I've read so much YA kind of urban fantasy since then. This is all about angels. And I really do think it stood up to the test of, the reread. It's a delightful story, and I think one of the big draws for me with this one is the fact that the main character has a really good relationship with her mom, and her mom is, the character is drawn so wonderfully. She's involved in her children's lives, and she is both a friend and a mother to this young girl, and it just played out really nicely. I love that when adults are painted as what adults usually are in real life, which is involved and interested and helpful and caring, loving, you know, all of those things. It was a sweet story, and I think it's still just as good a story as it was the first time I read it, so I left it at 5 stars. And then I picked up Calamity. This is by Brandon Sanderson, and it is book 3 in the Reckoner series. This is set in the near future. It's a little bit sci-fi, a little bit fantasy, a little bit urban fantasy, if you will. A lot of Brandon Sanderson fans, I think, find it very light and even a little bit trivial for him because he does so much adult fantasy. But for me, it's YA, and I loved it. It was narrated on audio by MacLeod Andrews, who I am starting to sound like a broken record about this guy, but he is phenomenal. He's... There were so many times when I couldn't decide if it was the dialogue by Brandon Sanderson or the narration by MacLeod Andrews that made me laugh out loud. David Charleston is kind of a guy on this team of reckoners who are this group that has set out to get rid of the epics, because the epics are bad guys with these superpowers that are just bullies. And the powers corrupt them. So this final book was all about why that happens, and one of the key characters who has kind of turned from a good guy to a bad guy, and their efforts to turn him back into a good guy, and seeing that he has good in him, and, you know, bringing that out and all kind of thing. It did take a long time to do what it was going to do, but in the end, it was just a great story. It had a very poignant ending, very kind of a bit of a tearjerker. Just, I don't know, I don't want to call it sweet because I think that's probably the wrong word, but poignant. It was very poignant, and I kind of went, oh. So I highly recommend that series. Gave that book 5 stars, and I've given the whole series 5 stars. It is 3 books, Steelheart, Firefight, and Calamity, and then Mitosis is book 1.5, so it's a novella. So if you can, pick that one up, and especially on audio, because MacLeod Andrews, like I say, is phenomenal. Then I picked up Fall With Me by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is book 4 in the Stay With You series, and it is narrated by Sophie Eastlake. Sophie Eastlake is Julia Whalen, and I like her. I think I've decided that I like her. She's narrated a lot of books, and I haven't been overly thrilled with them, but I still like them. I think she's a great narrator. She just has a specific range to her voice. So when she voices male characters, they all tend to sound the same. You really have to listen for the distinction between them. And I think that's my problem with her. But overall, she is excellent as a narrator, and I really enjoyed this one. Jennifer L. Armentrout is able to, within the new adult genre, take the standard boy meets girl, boy, they have a problem, they get back together kind of a plot line, and she throws in a little bit of interesting stuff. With this particular book, there was a hate crime that caused the main character's best friend to go into a coma, kind of a waking coma. And then the love interest is a police officer that she's known for a lot of years. And he was overseas in the military. It's not specific as to when. So he has that PTSD thing going on. And then he's also a police officer and had to shoot someone in the line of duty. So he's also dealing with that, has nightmares. So you have all of that playing into the relationship. And then she also threw in a subplot with a guy who was hurting women, raping and not killing them, but just messing with women. It was bad. And that didn't overshadow the plot. None of it did. It all worked really well together, which I think is a real strength for Jennifer L. Armentrout. And of course, you know, Julie Whalen brought it to life really nicely. And so while I don't think it was a big standout, it was a very good story, and I really liked it. And I gave it 3 stars, but I think I'm going to up that to 4 because I think this rates at about a 3.5 to 3.75 for me. So I'm probably going to up that on Goodreads to 4. Then I picked up Starflight by Melissa Landers. I really enjoyed this one. It's narrated on audio by Amanda Dolan, and I like Amanda Dolan a lot. She has a very distinct sound to her voice, and she's a very upbeat narrator. She does young adults really well. She does tend to rush a little bit in her narration, but that's okay because it's usually appropriate for the story. Amanda Dolan has a real ability to translate a young adult voice without making it sound like immature, and her range to distinguish the girls from the guys is also very good. She threw in some accents for some of the characters, which I thought was excellent, especially her British accent. I was kind of impressed with that. So I really enjoyed the narration. I thought that really enhanced the story. Melissa Landers has done YA sci-fi really well. It's the kind of thing where it could have had a very heavy-handed treatment of the story, and it wasn't. It was handled very lightly. And that's not to say that it was trivial at all. It was just not weighty. Like, stuff that happened didn't weigh you down. It was light enough to not be too light, but just enough. And it's Firefly. It's Firefly in space. It's all about a girl who wants to get to the outer fringe planets. She's a mechanic, and she just wants to get there. And she gets in a situation with a boy that doesn't like her, and she doesn't like him. And they have a backstory. And so she becomes his indentured servant. And then through a kind of turn of events, he loses his memory, and she tells him that he's her indentured servant. And they get on a spaceship that is full of not really pirates, but kind of misfit ne'er-do-wells who don't really, they're not in trouble with the law, but they certainly skirt around the law. And there's a lot of association with the mafia and crime lords and some other stuff. So it was delightful. I really enjoyed it. It had a lot going on in the plot to really keep it interesting, and I loved it. So I gave it 4 stars. I once again caught up with Abby Glines with Rosemary Beach with The Best Goodbye, and this is I think it's book 11 in the Rosemary Beach series, and it's the second to the last one. There's one more to come after this, even though this is called The Best Goodbye. This is narrated on audio by Jason Carpenter and Olivia Song, and I really like Jason Carpenter most of the time. But in this book, I didn't like him at all. And I'm not sure why. I think maybe it had more to do with the character than his voicing of the character. Maybe just the direction he tended to go with the intonations he gave and the way that affected the personality. Because you know, when you're narrating dialogue, you're going to give a certain spin on the way something comes out of that character's mouth. And so I just didn't really over much like the main character. Olivia's song was okay, but she was kind of timid and a little bit, I don't know, softer than she should have probably been. I actually listened to about half of it, and then I couldn't take the narration anymore, so I switched to an ebook, and I'm glad I finished it, but I thought it just happened too fast. I got to the end of the book, and I thought, what? This pretty much tells me I'm done with Abby Glines. She is an author who really exaggerates the situations, the plots. Her characters are all like caricatures almost. And she started to throw in this whole mafia, assassin, people killing each other for money, that kind of thing, to make it interesting. And it is moderately interesting, but not so much that I really want to even finish it. I don't know. I think it's run its course. And I think I've kind of run my course with Abby Glines. That's not to say she isn't a good author. She is for what she does, but I just think I'm kind of done. I'm just kind of done with her. So I give that one 2 stars. A couple of weeks ago, I read Sincerely Carter, which was a very delightful new adult book by Whitney Williams. And so I read as an ebook the novella that goes along with that called Sincerely Arizona. And it was just delightful, just as delightful as the book was. The novella just kind of picks up and finishes out a little bit of the story, and it leaves you in a good place. It's, you know, endearing characters, a little bit of sweetness, and I really liked it. So I gave it 4 stars. And lastly, I read These Broken Stars. This was a reread for me. It is book 1 in the Starbound series, and it's by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. It's narrated on audio from 3 points of view by Sarge Anton, who does the voice of the interviewer at the beginnings of the chapters. And then Johnathan McClain is the voice of Tarver, who is one of the main characters. And Cynthia Holloway is the narrator for Lilac, who is the other main character. And this is a great story about a shipwreck and 2 survivors that have to make their way to safety, essentially. They hate each other because she's the daughter of the richest guy in the whole everywhere, and he is a soldier, a decorated soldier that's the military is kind of using to be a PR figure, and he's very, you know, annoyed with that, and he doesn't know who she is, and then when he finds out, she treats him like crap, and so it's like they don't really get along very well, and they're stranded on this planet, so they have to learn how to work together. And it's a wonderful story. It played out a lot more quickly this time, but I was able to pay a lot more attention this time to the narration. And about that, I need to say that I think Sarge Anton was not a good choice for this interviewer. Because if you listen to the language they use, the interviewer is very terse and kind of impatient with Tarver as he's interviewing him. It's like a debriefing. And Sarge Anton's voice was just too old. He couldn't really pull off the attitude of this senior officer talking to this soldier. Johnathan McClain as Tarver was excellent. He was just excellent. He was really able to capture all the nuances of Tarver's personality. Tarver had a whole lot more to him than his distaste for Lilac and feeling like he's obliged to take care of her, but kind of resenting that. And McClain was really able to capture that in the way that he phrased things that Tarver said. And the dialogue was good, but you know, your dialogue, if someone can't bring it to life really well, then it's just not great dialogue. And it was very good because Johnathan McClain really captured that. Cynthia Holloway, too, was able to bring Lilac to life in such a way that you felt like she was a very capable person and a very determined person rather than a helpless kind of socialite who was expecting for, you know, things to be done for her. That's not how the character was written. And it was really refreshing that Cynthia Holloway didn't cheapen that by making her sound really just brainless, you know. She was a smart girl, and Cynthia Holloway really brought that out of the character in the way she voiced it. So those were all the books that I read between the last time I talked to you and now. And so this weekend, I picked up First Life by Gina Showalter. This is her newest YA dystopian, and it is book 1 in the Everlife series. It's narrated from 2 points of view by Emma Galvin and Zachary Weber. I like Emma Galvin a lot. Emma Galvin was the voice of Triss in Divergent, and she did a really, really good job with that narration. She always sounds kind of the same. She has that spunky, I'm taking no prisoners, I'm taking no, you know, guff from anyone kind of a voice for a YA female character. She's doing some accents that I think she's getting away with, but just barely. I'm not overly impressed with them. One is British, one is Irish. She's doing better with the Irish than she is the British. And I think she's okay for this character. I'm just not sure if I like the character very much. Zachary Weber is fabulous. He's always fabulous. He is able to do a British and an Irish accent and an American accent. And he sets the book off. He starts it off. And I think that he's voicing 2 of the male characters because there's going to be a love triangle, which I'm already going, oh, great. That's just fabulous. So, I don't know. I've read some of the reviews about this book on Goodreads, and it's not as highly rated as I would prefer or would expect from Gina Showalter because she's a very experienced romance author. But we'll see. I also picked up Treason by Orson Scott Card. That's narrated by Stefan Rudnicki, and I think that's going to be good. That's sci-fi, Orson Scott Card, who wrote Ender's Game. And I did that because my oldest daughter said, you got to read that, Mom. You got to read it. It's fabulous. So I trust her. And lastly, I am going to pick up Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. This is narrated by this cast of people. Susan Lyons, Anna Bentink, Stephen Crossley, who I've heard of before, Alex Tregear, Andrew Wincott, and Owen Lindsay. That's a lot of people to voice a book. So that whole cast, I think, is going to make it fabulous. Now, that's a tearjerker. I've been kind of avoiding this book for a while because I don't know about tearjerkers. They make me cry, and I hate that. That's my weekend and the whole slew of books that I read up till now. Let me know what you're reading. Tell me. I always want to know, and I love hearing about what you're reading and what you think about what I've read. You know, if you have any opinions, throw them out there. You know, I always want to talk about it. So have a good weekend, and that's it for now for me. I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
When I'm gone, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my walk. You're gonna miss me by my taco. You're gonna miss me when I'm gone.